Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fit Geek Show. It's been a long time since I recorded a podcast, and today we have Peter Bond, all the way from Netherlands, who is a scientific researcher. He's a consultant. He's a fitness geek, and he's also written a book on steroids. That's known as Book on Steroids. So, Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very good, thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much. Peter, what's the situation of coronavirus in your country as of now?
Well, cases are getting better. Well, the cases themselves are going up, but the mortality is going down, partly because of the vaccination schema. They've vaccinated most of the elderly. But other than that, we're still on lockdown, including the gyms. So I haven't had a workout in quite a while now.
Oh, that must be frustrating. Do you work out at home?
Well, I work out at home. I got two 14-kilo dumbbells, which I use from time to time, but it's not really a real workout.
Yeah, I completely understand, because I too just use the TRX, and I had like a 20-kilo kettlebell. That's all I used for 1 year until now things opened up.
Yeah, it's better than doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So coming back to our topic, Peter, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Steroids have been really interesting to me. The use of steroids have increased a lot in India in the past decade. I had only heard about them when I was 18, 19, but I actually experienced them in the sense like others using a lot. Just like a couple of years ago, I was shocked to see how many people are using steroids in my city, Mumbai especially. So what got you interested in the fitness industry and writing a book on steroids? Because your background is in computer science.
Yeah, so I've studied computer science and I got my bachelor's degree in that. And then subsequently I did a master's degree in software engineering. So that's something entirely different. But when I was 17, still in high school, I started lifting weights, started working out with a friend of mine. And around the age of 19 or 20, I think, I got in touch with a book on human metabolism, which really interested me, quite to my surprise, because I hated biology in high school. And then from that book, I started reading in a book on cell biology, essential cell biology, molecular biology of the cell, and then started reading physiology books and stuff like that. And eventually, if you're in the fitness scene, it won't take long before you hear about anabolic steroids, of course. And to some extent, the subject of anabolic steroids combines a lot of these things, which I loved reading about. So it has some cell biology in it, some biochemistry in it, physiology, of course. So I guess that's kind of what got me interested in anabolic steroids.
Awesome. And why do you think have steroids become an integral part of not only the bodybuilding industry, but also the fitness industry and the sport industry?
Well, I think the main reason in the sports industry is that pretty much every sport in which there's some compound involving muscle strength, you'll get better if you use anabolic steroids. So people who use steroids in those sports will be better than the ones who aren't using steroids, all things equal. So that's one part. And the other part in the fitness scene and the bodybuilding scene, of course, it's quite obvious. Building muscle is at the center of the sport. So if you take something which increases muscle mass, and it does so by quite a lot, then you got a pretty damn big advantage over your competitors if they don't use it. If anything, in bodybuilding, it's pretty much mandatory to use anabolic steroids if you want to compete at a high level anyhow. And you even see this with the women's divisions. Of course, there are quite some exceptions to that, but in my experience, a lot of women in the women's bikini fitness and classes like that already use steroids as well, simply because it helps them.
Okay. Do you think the increase of steroids among women is because of the years of sexism that might have been in any industry, or the whole phenomenon of the men being stronger than women? Do you think that has affected the mentality of the?
Well, if I had to guess, I think if there is a rise of anabolic steroid usage among women, I think it mostly has to do with social media. Pretty much because if you're on social media and you're a bit into the fitness scene, you'll see all these girls who compete in the bikini divisions and stuff like that. And I can imagine that a lot of women would like to look like that or close to that or something like that. And then it's not that unimaginable that if they can't obtain that naturally, that they'll move on to steroids. And they're pretty easy available online if you know where to look. And there's plenty of information about them as well. But if I had to guess, I think the main factor would be social media. Simply the exposure of physiques which have been obtained with steroids are more in your face nowadays.
Correct. I never thought about that. It's true. Because in the past, like, I think a decade, the whole concept of like fitness influencers on, say, Instagram or YouTube has increased a lot. And, nowadays, even in India, now internet is so cheap on the phones. People are just streaming YouTube, Instagram the entire day. So I guess what you're exposed to, you expect to have that in the sense like it's just intriguing.
If you go back 2 decades ago, the only way you would see these kind of physiques, you would need to buy a magazine which would have them, or happen to see something on television with it, or happen to have people who look like that in your own gym. But in general, the exposure to such physiques would be a lot lower than nowadays with social media, of course.
That's true. That's true. Because when I was a kid, I used to be a big fan of Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone. And I always thought of like becoming like him, and that's why I started doing some like push-ups and squats when I was 13, and later on I understood that anabolic steroids might have been a part of his journey. So it took me years, but yeah, you're right. At that time, only TV, movies, magazines were the source of exposure, but now it's everywhere. And I've seen like so many YouTube stars recommending workout plans, becoming expert fitness trainers, but not revealing to their crowd that they are using steroids, and the crowd expecting to be like them. So do you think that these fitness influencers should be more honest about their use of steroids to their followers?
Well, it's a bit of a difficult question to answer, because on the one hand, it's your own health / medical / whatever decision to use them. And in a sense, you would be disclosing something very private of yourself. But on the other hand, the people who look up to you and take you as an example, they should know that you're kind of cheating how you obtained your physique. It will probably be for the better if people would admit it, but I don't think that's ever really going to happen on a big scale.
True, I agree. It's not just any country, it's everywhere like that. So it's generally like that. You're right. So we always talk about the negatives of steroids, but what are some positives of taking steroids in men and women both? This question doesn't get addressed enough, I think.
Well, the biggest pluses are, of course, you'll gain more muscle mass. It works really well for that, incredibly well. And that's for both guys and women, as a lot of women probably would like a bit more muscle mass as well, especially if they're into the fitness scene. And another thing is you simply get a whole lot stronger as well. That's a really nice plus, of course. It's just, if you'd always train naturally and then like you get stuck, you can't progress anymore, you try things, you make these little tiny bits of progress, and then if you were to take steroids, suddenly boom, your weights go up again, your physique gets bigger again, and all you did was take a drug. So that's basically the big plus of anabolic steroids: more muscle mass and more muscle strength.
Correct. Because along with muscle mass, I think the tendon and ligaments also increase in size and they help you lift more, right?
Yeah, so this is an area there isn't that much research in. In general, anecdotally, I see more injuries in people who take anabolic steroids than people who don't take them. Could have a variety of reasons, but one being that anabolic steroids simply make your muscles grow faster than the surrounding supporting connective tissue. So you kind of outgrow your connective tissue in strength if you take anabolic steroids, which would increase the risk, for example, on tendon injuries. Or it could do something with the structure and integrity of the tendons and the connective tissue. But in general, it's also safe to assume that in the long term, that grows with it, because these huge freaking bodybuilders and powerlifters, they're pulling insane weights and they're not rupturing their muscles and connective tissue all the damn time.
That's right. And coming to the side effects of steroid use, I know they are a little different between men and women. So could you please describe the side effects of anabolic steroids in each gender?
So, well, let's start with men, as a lot of these side effects also in principle apply to women. So a common side effect would simply be acne, which most probably no, I don't think I need to introduce that to the listeners.
Yeah.
And acne can occur in both men and women, obviously. But a side effect that will only occur in men is gynecomastia, which is the benign development of breast tissue in a man. That's something which happens well, not very often, but often enough that it's a serious risk for men to take it. But again, it's not something that will kill you. You're not going to die from gynecomastia. Another issue which might occur in some men is that their prostate might grow, but this is really limited to men who went on steroids when their baseline testosterone levels were very, very low. Because if you give normal, healthy men high dosages of anabolic steroids, their prostate doesn't grow. Another thing would be, and of course, women don't have a prostate. So, and another thing would be with the oral anabolic steroids. They're toxic for the liver. Usually, this doesn't really result in anything clinically meaningful, so you won't really experience that side effect. But there are some known cases in which it has led to liver adenomas, for example, liver tumors. So that's a risk involved. And another thing with the oral anabolic steroids, but this also kind of applies to the injectable ones, is that it decreases the HDL cholesterol, which can be considered a good cholesterol, although I have to say it's really not clear in how much that's relevant for cardiovascular disease risk. But another thing is that the oral anabolic steroids increase LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. And it's pretty clear that almost anything that increases LDL cholesterol, certainly oral anabolic steroids, which can do it by quite a bit, increase cardiovascular disease risk. So that's something bad, and that's something which can affect both men and women. Another thing you see in anabolic steroid users is that there's a mild increase in blood pressure. For some, this mild increase to induce hypertension. And again, this side effect that probably also will occur in women, although I don't know of any specific studies which have shown that. Another thing is the hematocrit, which can increase. That's the percentage of blood volume occupied by red blood cells. It's usually between 40 and 50%. And anabolic steroids are quite potent in increasing that. And the risk with that is if you have a higher percentage of red blood cells in your bloodstream, your blood gets thicker, so to say. And this slightly increases the risk of thrombosis. In general, this isn't really a problem, especially because most anabolic steroid users are quite young. They're under the age of 40 or at least under the age of 50, and they don't really have other risk factors for thrombosis. So then it's not really a problem. But if there are other risk factors present, and especially if it's someone who's older, 50, 60, perhaps 70 using anabolic steroids, then that can be a serious problem if hematocrit gets too high. And that's also something which happens in women, their hematocrit increases. And then there is the risk of hair loss. So the male pattern hair loss, which also would occur in women, can occur in women if they use anabolic steroids. Of course, the infertility, your sperm production decreases a lot or even comes to a complete halt if you use them. And in women specifically, it can cause hair growth in male areas, like under arms, under legs, under backs, under chest, under face, hirsutism, it's called, which is, well, most women probably don't want that. Another issue, and this applies to both men and women, is that in the long term, it can affect the heart in a negative way. And this might increase your risk of, who knows, maybe a myocardial infarction or something like that. And then another issue specific to women is that their voice can get lower. So they get a deepening of the voice, dysphonia. And anecdotally, their breasts can shrink a bit, although this is seemingly not permanent. But the deepening of the voice most likely is. And then a last thing which can happen to women is that their clitoris grows. And this is likely also something permanent, which it's not going to kill you, but I guess most women wouldn't like that. I think I've kind of covered most, if not all of the
that was quite deep of information. So in your experience or personal experience, have you ever come across any extreme cases that suffered from a lot of health issues because of taking anabolic steroids?
Not really with people I know personally, but there is a case study of a Dutch guy as well. I'm Dutch. And he got admitted to the hospital because he had he went to the emergency room because he had severe abdominal pain. And so they made the scan of his abdomen, and what they saw was a huge hemorrhage, which basically means there's something bleeding in your liver. And they saw several liver adenomas in his liver as well. And the liver adenoma is a liver tumor. So, and this was, I think he was 25 or 27, something like that. He was in his 20s. And this guy, so it's very young, and he got to the emergency room with liver adenomas, super painful, bleeding his liver. And when asked what he was taking, he replied that he was taking 60 milliliters of anabolic steroids a week, which is an insane amount. Even competitors who take quite a lot are more like around 10 milliliters a week, or 12, perhaps 14 if they're really pushing it. And this guy was taking 60 milliliters of anabolic steroids a week. And in addition, he took growth hormone, clenbuterol, if I'm not mistaken, anastrozole, tamoxifen. So this guy was a walking pharmacy. And he actually almost died, but he survived. But this was certainly one of the most extreme cases I've read about in the literature.
Wow, that's quite dangerous. I mean, I had a similar experience as well with one of my clients, ex-clients. He too, in Mumbai especially, there are a few trainers who do not have any idea as to how to work with anabolic steroids. But because they make some commission out of it, and because they can, show that their clients are doing well, they promote them to their clients. And one of my ex-clients took it from somebody else. And I think he took growth hormone and he took anabolic steroids, like I think pills. And after a while, he did grow in muscle size for sure. The trainer made him do like Olympiad style workouts, like twice a day, 2 to 2 hours each. And I think he fainted in his apartment, and they had to hospitalize him. It was pretty bad. The doctor was pretty angry at my client and the trainer both, because
Yeah.
the guy had no idea about how much dosage to give and when to pull back or nothing like that.
Yeah. It's pretty scary.
Pretty scary. Right. So, oh yeah. So coming to this topic, why have you never used steroids? Because you've written a book on it.
Well, I'm not really the type for it, I guess.
Okay.
It certainly appeals to me because I would like to have more muscle mass as well, especially now the gyms are closed and I've lost quite a bit, I
Yeah.
guess. But preferably, I like to become as old as possible with the highest quality of life as possible. And I don't think that can be united with using anabolic steroids in high dosages. So, but it does. I mean, I get the appeal definitely, but it's just not my thing, and I don't have any competition ambitions either. So I just work out for fun. So I'm more muscular than someone who doesn't lift.
That's right. So, what different kinds of steroids are available in the pharmaceutical industry? I know it's a big topic, but in what forms are they available? And if you could also elaborate a little bit on something called the ECA stack, because I've heard that that is banned around the world, but in India, people are still taking it.
What kind of stack?
ECA, the ephedra
Oh,
caffeine
ECA
aspirin.
stack.
Yeah.
Well, let me start with the first part, which kind of pharmaceutical steroids there are. So the ones which actually got approved for human use at some point, one point or another, are of course testosterone, which still is in use today, and nandrolone, also known as decadurabolin, which is still in use today. It's prescribed in anemia and in severe osteoporosis in postmenopausal women. And then you got oxandrolone, also known as Anavar. It's occasionally prescribed, not in Europe anymore, I think, with burn victims, I think it was, and some muscle wasting conditions. And then in the past, Dianabol used to be approved, Primobolan used to be approved, Winstrol, and Masteron. I think those kind of cover all the ones who got approved at one point or another. But as far as I know, these aren't used or prescribed anywhere in the world anymore, perhaps with some exceptions in some countries. And then there are a bunch of others. Like Trembolon is very, very popular by anabolic steroid users, and that has never been approved for human use as far as I know. So yeah, and the differences, well, there are less differences between anabolic steroids than most people would love to believe. But in general, I guess you could make a subdivision between the ones you can inject and the ones you can take orally.
Okay.
The oral ones are bad for your liver and really harsh on your cholesterol compared to the injectable ones. And then another subdivision you could make, I guess, is based on if it has estrogenic side effects or not. Like testosterone, it converts to estrogen, estradiol. Nandrolone does to some degree as well, and a couple of other steroids. And then there is, I guess you could make a subdivision based on that some steroids also activate receptors other than the androgen receptor. So for example, Trembolone likely activates the progesterone receptor, and methyltranolone, which is an oral anabolic steroid. It's like the oral version of Trembolone.
Okay.
it is a strong antagonist for the mineralocorticoid receptor, also known as the aldosterone receptor. And what that basically does is, if it gets activated, you retain salt and thereby water. So if it's an antagonist, it leads to salt loss and thus to water loss. It functions as a diuretic, basically.
Okay.
But in general, most popular anabolic steroids don't really activate other types of receptors. In general, most anabolic steroids basically are kind of the same, outside of the differences I just named. Yeah. Oh, and then the ECA stack.
Yeah.
So these ephedrine, caffeine, and aspirin. I'm not really knowledgeable about the cutting agents like ephedrine, but it's like it slightly increases energy expenditure, and caffeine does so as well. And from what I remember, I know this stack used to be popular here too about a decade ago or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, aspirin can enhance the effects a bit because it does something with one of the receptors. I kind of forgot. But it's very different from anabolic steroids. It just helps you lose fat by increasing energy expenditure and perhaps suppress appetite a bit.
Okay.
Whereas anabolic steroids just make you grow muscle a lot faster.
Okay. And so is there a distinction between anabolic steroids and other performance enhancing drugs like growth hormone or other
yes,
drugs? So,
definitely.
Yeah.
So besides anabolic steroids, what you see being used a lot is growth hormone, insulin, and some cutting agents, but they don't really enhance your performance.
Okay.
And also this new type of drugs, which activate the peroxisome proliferator activated receptor, PPAR agonists of the gamma type, I think. And the difference is basically they bind to different receptors and activate different signaling pathways and thereby have different effects on different tissues. So anabolic steroids, they have the muscle building effect and all the side effects I mentioned previously, whereas growth hormone is really a different kind of drug. It doesn't activate the androgen receptor. It's definitely not potent at building muscle, contrary to popular belief. And it can decrease your insulin sensitivity. That's one thing that it can do. It leads to some water retention. It simply are different, really different types of drugs.
All right, so coming to your books, you've written 2 books, Bond's Dietary Supplements and Book on Steroids, of course. And I think Book on Steroids got published just last year.
Yeah, last year in, I think it was August.
Okay. So could you please elaborate on the 2 of them?
And I've actually written 3 books.
Okay.
So I've written 2 in Dutch. My first Dutch book was about anabolic steroids as well. It was mostly about the biochemistry behind it and a lot of the molecular stuff nobody cares about. And then my second Dutch book was what later also became an English version, Bond's Dietary Supplements.
Okay.
So that was originally a Dutch book in which I covered 8 different sport supplements, and I laid down the physiology behind it, how it worked, and also the molecular pathways involved and stuff like that. And then, yeah, Book on Steroids is my latest book, in which I simply put down all stuff I believe someone should know about anabolic steroids if he ever want to use it, or if he's assisting someone who uses it.
Okay, okay. And is there anything else that you would like to add to this conversation?
No, not that I can think of, no.
Okay. Let's see, we have some other questions. Yes. So how can someone get in touch with you and follow your content and maybe approach you if they need something?
Yeah, so I have a blog on peterbond.org, and if someone wants to contact me, can go through email at peter@peterbond.org. And I have an Instagram account, peterbond.nl, where I semi-regularly post something. Once in a while, I decide to write an article and put it on my blog and run it on Instagram. Yeah. So yeah.
And what kind of services do you offer?
I offer consultancy,
Okay.
mostly for people who have some questions about performance-enhancing drugs.
Mhm.
And I offer it through my website on peterbond.org. It's somewhere in the top menu, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I agree, because I just checked your website like a few days ago. It's in the top menu somewhere. Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today. This conversation will be available.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. It's going to be available on Facebook, YouTube, all major podcasting platforms, and also IGTV. So if you want to share it with your viewers, it'll be up by, say, tomorrow maybe. I'll just edit it a little bit and then it'll be up.
Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. So thanks a lot. Stay safe, and I hope gym's open soon there so you can lift more.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's probably gonna take another 2 months, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I know the feeling, because when I started lifting heavy just last week, it felt like heaven. So good.
Yeah, actually, we had a first lockdown last year, and then the gyms opened for about 2 months or something like that.
Okay.
It was really great to train again.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 2 months, they closed again. I was like, ah, shit.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yes.
Thank you.